Hello,
Hello,
BowerBird.
BowerBirders. Nick, I need your help.
So today we're going to talk about callouts, which was what Ben was demonstrating.
That's my theatre. Yeah,
A
theatre
callout
background.
is something that we've added to BowerBird over time, and we want to explain how it works because they've become really important because it's how journalists are asking for specific content. So is that a rough idea of what a callout is, Ben, or have you got a better description?
Yeah, well, I guess a little bit of some historical context to this is when email started becoming useful, which is in our lifetimes, but quite a long time ago now. What would happen is that a print publication usually would have a set editorial calendar. So they would say, okay, over the next 12 months, these are the themes of each issue. This is the content that we're looking for. And what generally would happen, or what generally started to happen over time, is that they would send that out to PR mainly. PR companies. So they would send out the editorial calendar. PR company would know when certain things were due for certain issues, and they would then be able to submit content for that.
So this was really the publications being proactive with the topics that they wanted to cover.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, it may even have come from the advertising side of things as well, or maybe that happened in conjunction where the advertisers also get the editorial calendar so they can place their ads in the issue that they want. So I think there's a little bit of, both sides of the equation working on that one.
Now, if you're wondering what you've tuned into, this is the Bowerbird Show. My name is Nick,
My name's Ben.
Ben, and we're the co-founders of BowerBird, which is a global press center for design and architecture. We've helped publish over 30,000 stories now in probably every single country. And we're behind the scenes and what connects a lot of the design journalists within that architecture and design sphere. So that's where our background is coming from. And we like to unpack these niche sort of topics.
Absolutely.
So, do you want to read out that quote to get us started? We got some feedback from the community, which this one will
Yes.
remain nameless.
Yeah, so we've got, I've been let down by so many PRs, so that's public relations people, recently getting quotes from architects on time. So this means quotes for articles, so writing back what an architect thinks about a particular issue. This is the third time I've had to file a story late. It gives me so much anxiety, so I thought BowerBird has such a massive database and I can go direct. Don't need to wait for PR. Okay, I didn't realize I was going to be quite as promotional as as it sounds, but essentially it highlights why someone would do a call out, right? Which is it's really hard to get content, to get quotes, to get all sorts of things from architects.
Yeah, maybe a good way of approaching this is to put ourselves in the minds of a journalist and how hard it is for them to get quality content. So you imagine you're a journalist, you're on the other side of the world, you are searching for a project, you're trying to get a topic. Like maybe your editor has said, we really want to cover this topic. And now you've got to go out into the world and you would think it would be easy to just go and use Google to do this. And it turns out that it's really, really hard to do this,
Yes, and
especially under deadline.
one of the reasons for that is you're trying to find unique original content, and Google generally only has content that's already been published. So
Yep.
unless you go to a specific practice that you already know, or do a lot of, I mean, the research that it takes, the amount of time that it takes to just do the research is unbelievable. So if your story is you've got to interview 5 architects around a particular theme, it's going to be hard to find those 5 architects unless you're going to people you already know.
Well, and then you're doing all the back and forth. So let's say you find some architects, you spend a couple of days going through Pinterest, going through other magazines where something's already been covered. Then you're trying to find contact details, you're trying to call those architects. Maybe they give you the time of day. Then you're trying to see if they've got content that will fit this story. And then you're trying to get them to give you quotes or information. That ends up now suddenly you've spent 2 weeks on an article when you've got to write, 5 or 6 articles in that time. That's why it's really, really hard.
And that's, I mean, in a way, I think that's why a lot of the media that's out there is looking at a single project. So we speak to a lot of journalists who say they would love to cover more theme based stories, more topic based things. But the reality is, it's really hard to get that content together. So if you get a project where you get to just interview maybe the architect and the client from the project, that's a lot more contained. You can generally get that to work. But if you want to be telling larger stories about, I mean, anything from, sustainability through to healthcare. Sometimes it's really hard to tell those stories because you can't get all of your ducks in a row. You might want to interview 5 different people for an article. When I worked at a publisher who did print, that I remember there was an issue where they looked at one building, but everyone who contributed to that building. So the builder, the interior designers, the architects, there was like a heritage architect, I think, as well. And that was a months long exercise to go and interview all of those people. Like no joke. It took months to write the editorial for that
You
project.
think about the cost of hiring somebody to spend a month to do one article, especially in the modern world where you just expect articles to be popping up in front of you every single day. It's a different world, isn't it? Which I guess is why we've ended up with project-based stories around architecture and design, where the architect is putting together a package of content, describing it as best they can, and then the journalist is trying their best to tell a story with what the architect has given them, which to me is it works. Like I think it's the baseline of how this publishing industry survives. But as soon as journalists get to write real stories, they seem to have responded really well to being able to do like a call out and actually asking for what they need rather than using what's just sort of coming through their submission inbox.
When we first started Callouts, it was very analog, I guess. I think we had, I can't actually remember who it was. I couldn't figure out who the first one was to send it, but a journalist contacted us and said that they were looking for a particular thing. And we went, well, we've got a database of architects and designers here. Let's just send this out to people and see what sort of response you get. And I remember how well that first one worked. And we went, okay, cool, we've got something here.
To zoom out a little bit, I think part of the reason we've had a lot of copy and paste articles is precisely because of this. So, for the last 20 years, we've had websites come onto the scene. They're trying to publish lots of stories every single day. And so they're reliant on the information flowing into them. And now I think we might just be at this point where copy and paste is sort of being phased out. There's a few reasons why that is, but I think call outs is definitely something we're seeing where we're seeing repeat journalists come back week after week and say, I want to do another call out. Can I do another call out? Because it allows them to sort of move their publication away from everybody else. I think that's the trouble with the project flow stuff, where, okay, the project is published, everybody gets the same media kit, and they're all publishing basically after each other. Whereas call outs, people are coming up with some really interesting topics that I never thought would be, what's the right word, like popular. And it turns out to be the complete opposite.
Think what's interesting, I think, we had some feedback from an architect who had received one of these call outs who sort of said I think overall was saying, oh, it's a bit of a frivolous article. So it's not dealing with serious architecture. It's just dealing with, a populist sort of thing. But I think what's really important to remember is that the journalists are much closer to their audience than you are. And so they're giving their audience what they want or what they click on or what they read and spend time on. So you kind of have to trust them a little bit more, I think.
Yeah, because the journalists are obviously their whole job is to make sure that audience is engaged and they're responding and they're happy. And when they do these interesting stories, they must be getting some sort of response because,
Absolutely.
yeah. And so people are probably starving for, I guess, stories which are a little bit, it's funny. I wouldn't even use the word different because when we're going to read out some of these call outs so you can see what we're talking about. But it's not like they're clickbait sort of topics. They're just different topics that you wouldn't normally see. Like you wouldn't go to an architect's website looking for this specific topic. You've got to dig into the project, find an element of the project, and then that becomes part of a larger story.
Yeah, some of the call outs that we've had, you might see articles similar to it on places like Dezeen where they do a wrap up of something. So they'll do, the best 10 of the best yellow kitchens from this year. They publish a lot of content. Generally, what they're doing is they're taking existing content and repackaging it to point back to those articles. But what we're seeing is that there's genuine interest in those articles. So people are actually looking for original content to go with those articles now as well.
Yeah, so we might explain just the mechanics of how this is working. So, what happens now is a journalist can go onto BowerBird and then they can post a call out. So, what they're telling us is, I'm looking for this. And then we send that out to our BowerBird members, and then they get to submit content in response to whatever the journalist is looking for. So this is working really effectively for journalists because now they have a submissions dashboard on BowerBird. So they get Bower kits being submitted. So it's a visual dashboard. So they can very quickly go through and they might have 20 projects there which fit this call out. And so they've got lots to choose from and they get to tell rich stories, which, like we said before, that would have taken weeks or months to be able to do. And now they get to have this unique article. It's interesting how a little feature which we just kind of added on thinking, oh, this might help, is becoming this much bigger component of how architects and designers are getting published.
Well, and I think the fascinating thing that's coming up with a lot of these is it's not just projects. So they're looking for images of very specific things like step up baths, which sounds like something from the 70s, but there's actually some really amazing modern examples of it. They're able to also ask for comment. So they're not just asking for projects. They're saying, hey, send us a project, but also tell us why, like, you're an expert on this particular thing. Tell us, what does it cost? What are the pitfalls? What are the benefits of these things? So I think that's the really interesting thing of being able to crowdsource the expert commentary as well, not just get a project.
Yeah, comment's fascinating. This whole project-based world is in many ways formulaic. And the comment-based world is very different because you're elevating the architect as the expert rather than the building being this thing of desire. And so when these publications are going, I need high quality people to give me comment on this issue. That's fantastic. If you can be that person that they call so that your name is there when they're talking about this topic or that topic, guess what? Now you've got free publicity that's just going to come in again and again and again.
Do you remember? I mean, it still happens, but do you remember when thought leadership was the catchphrase that all of the directors of all of the practices were getting these thought leadership pieces written, usually ghost written by a writer? But I think that's really interesting is that in reality, those thought leadership pieces, which quite often ended up just on a blog for a practice somewhere, really now we're getting to the heart of it, which is when you're an expert on a topic, you are providing your thoughts.
You know why I don't think they ever really worked? Is because it was going in the wrong direction. It was the architects trying to come up with what they think the journalists want,
Mhm.
rather than the journalists being able to just say, hey, we really want to cover this topic. Can you fit that bill? And then suddenly all of these architects, like they're almost like sleepers. Like some of the people we're seeing coming in, they weren't really big on the media world. And suddenly there's a match with that call out. They go, I've been waiting for that.
Yeah.
That's the thing that I have a really good example of. I'm jumping straight in and I want to share that with the world. The journalist happy, the architect is happy. Really good match.
Yeah. Should we jump into some of these callouts?
Yeah, yep. So what we're going to do is we're going to read through some call outs. We'll just add these as some screenshots after the fact in editing, but we'll read through some of these so that you get an idea of what we're dealing with. Which one do you want to choose first, Ben?
I actually really love this one. So this one is Interior Design magazine, and they're looking for the home of an Australian interior designer that they design themselves. So it's their own home. The reason I love this is it's really niche. Like, to be perfectly honest, a lot of people in architecture and design don't have the money to do their own homes. So when it does happen, it is pretty magical. So I think this is one of those ones where it's like trying to find something really hard. Well, there's just not that many examples of, and reaching out to a lot of interior designers to see if any of them have done a good job on their own home.
I often think that some of the best designs are from architects and interior
Mm,
designers when they do their own home because it
yeah.
becomes this passion project where they do all the things that they couldn't convince their clients to do, and maybe it didn't make financial sense, and they went through a lot of pain to make this happen, but they end up with this really, really cool result.
But I
So
also I also reckon that they're able to do it for a lot less money because they call in all of those favors
But
from the furniture suppliers and stuff from over the years. So it might take them 20 or 30 years to get to the point where they can do it, but then they do it for a good price. Yeah.
here's one which is a little bit more, you wouldn't say this is a glamorous topic, but it's still an interesting one, which is looking for high quality house images with diverse cladding types. It's this whole material aspect as well, where I think a lot of the publications, they're trying to align probably with their advertisers in some way, or they're trying to tell stories about the details rather than just the entire project and going, here is an example of how you might do X.
The reason I love this one is it's also got the expert comments in here. So it's
Mm.
saying how much do different types of cladding cost? What factors affect cladding costs, size, prep work, maintenance? How to choose the best cladding for your project? These are the things that architects are genuinely expert in. They've spent probably years learning about different cladding types and the ones that work and the ones that work in different climates and all of these different things. And I think that's when you go, okay, this is the thing that even in a project story, you probably wouldn't get an opportunity to talk about something like cladding unless it's a standout feature of the project.
Not at all. But I can imagine people wanting to have those types of stories. Because if you go to the, like a really basic call out might be, we're looking for blue rooms and insert any color you want. This might be one of those examples where some people might go, ah, that's a low quality story. I look at it and go, that's exactly what the general public is looking for. They're not experts in architecture. They're trying to understand it. And so you have to understand it's a stair step approach where they have to enter into this world. They have to learn a little bit around design and then they go down the rabbit hole. And eventually they start seeing enough projects and they start to say, oh, architects and designers do a really good job at this. And then they keep going and they fall in
Well,
love with somebody and off they go.
and specifically, they've probably added your project and your image to a Pinterest board if they like it. And architects and designers know that so often clients will come to you with a Pinterest board that has your projects on it. It's a real world lead essentially into your business and into your services.
We've got another one here, which is looking for global innovative aged care sector projects. So this is coming from BEC. These are not the super glamorous projects, but they're really interesting in that from a design perspective. So we probably wouldn't be highlighting aged care naturally, whereas with the call out, it tells us exactly what the journalists like really want and allows the architects to match up. So
And I think that's an example of a story that is hard for journalists to find and to talk about. BEC is, for anyone who doesn't know, the Built Environment Channel. They actually have TV screens in practices within Australia. So the audience is effectively other architects. But that's a really powerful thing as well. You're doing work like aged care, which a lot of people have a passion for, wanting to actually help people within the aged care sector. So the end users. So I think, those stories can be really powerful. And quite often those practices that do those sorts of projects don't get the attention that they deserve because there's just not as much media out there that covers it.
here's another niche one. So this is from Living, etc. Looking for high quality images of bathrooms, toilets with brick floors. Again, it's a niche where you would never have expected that to be a thing. Like brick floors. Are there that many projects in the world with brick floors? You wouldn't
I
expect
just,
it to be like a normal
I'm just
category.
like,
Like,
I'm just like Anthony Martin. If you haven't submitted to this, Anthony Martin, you've got a couple of hours left. Yes, sorry, that's just an architect in Australia who does like the brick floors.
we should mention that on these call outs that you do have deadlines. So these come and go. So you have this moment where journalists are interested in a very niche topic. That's your opportunity to jump in, you submit, and
Well,
then
actually, that's actually a really good point. These deadlines, what we've noticed a trend over, I don't know how many, 100 of these we've done now. A trend that we're seeing is quite short deadlines because these ones. So I think the Living Etc. ones are online mostly, but then we've had print ones as well where the deadline is really tight. That's why you have to be proactive. That quote that we opened the episode with, you can't wait. You can't go, oh, I'll get onto that later. It's like you see one of these call outs come through, you have to answer it straight away. And what we're seeing is the people who answer it straight away, and give the journalist everything they want, which is, images and also expert comment and answering all of the points of the brief. They're the ones who are going to get through every time. So answer quickly and give them everything they need.
There's also this trend towards micro projects where there's a lot of people who they don't have a complete project, but an element of the design is really well done. So it could be, for example, you've got this beautiful bathroom with a brick floor. The rest of the house could be horrendous. Maybe you didn't get to work on that part, but the bathroom looked great. Previously, there wasn't really a place to get that published. It just didn't exist because it wasn't a project. You didn't have enough photos because you'd need 10 photos of a building and you'd have to encapsulate it all. And with these, you just need to have that one space or that one thing, that spiral staircase or timber being stored next to fireplaces. You're just sort of coming up with all the random call outs that we've seen over the last few months. But if that matches you, suddenly, but you may be a little practice, but suddenly you can get published. I'm scrolling through here. Have you see any others that you want to call out?
Well, on that topic, one that I really like, which is actually an open call out, which means that there's no specific deadline for it, is Splash Magazine, which is a pool and spa industry publication, and they're always looking for high quality swimming pools and spas from Australia. So the reason I love this one is obviously, they're aligning with their organization, which is swimming pools and spas, but that's kind of where you want to be placed. If you're an architect that's doing work with swimming pools and spas, you want to show how amazing you are at doing that.
Yeah, if you're designing in a hot climate, being able to get into pool magazines, pool websites, because
Mhm.
that's a luxury item. People are probably dreaming about their designed home with a pool in it. Where do you start? You may be starting with that pool magazine, and that takes you down the rabbit hole again. All those side industries, I think there's a heap of value. Getting
Undoubtedly.
obviously use architecture as your base, and then try to branch out from that wherever you can. Whether that's pools, whether that's product materials and suppliers, whether that's something like education magazines if you're doing schools. Like that's where you'll probably find your clients.
And interestingly, there's another one here, which is for view.com.au, which is a real estate website, but they produce editorial. And what they're looking for is projects that are on the market or are about to go on the market for selling, basically. And you go, that's an amazing opportunity. And architects usually know before anyone else if one of their projects is being
So
sold. And so I think that's a real niche call out in that it's really a time limited thing where they can actually cover that particular project. But there's again another example of where you can benefit from another stage in the life cycle of that project.
there's quite a few open call outs here too. So do you want to explain how that works? So obviously you've got deadlines.
Yep. So essentially, these open call outs, there's no deadline on there because they're always looking for content. So it's usually going to be an online publication, but it could be any number of things. Could be a YouTube channel, could be pretty much anything. We've got freelancers who have always open. And the idea behind this is that when you jump onto something like BowerBird, you'll actually get notified of all the open call outs. So it prompts you to give them more of the content that they're looking for. Generally, they won't be as specific. So we've got one here that is for a website called. Let me just click on it because I always forget what the name of the Food in Space magazine. So it's a website based out of Italy, run by a guy who called Marco Biolci. I don't know. I'm probably butchering that that name, but he works for a big international real estate company. And he's created this little blog that's just about the food and beverage industry, interior design within the food and beverage industry. So that is niche, but he's also just saying, hey, food and beverage, a good design from anywhere in the world, submit to me.
Oh, that's similar to this one here for prefab projects, which I think is Andrew Chung's
Yep.
latest publication.
Yep.
So this is a brand new publication. He's creating micro publications on topics which otherwise wouldn't have been covered. And part of the reason he can do it is because of callouts. So he can now put this up on Bowerbird and get enough content on something which would have been really hard to source previously,
Mm-hmm.
but he can now just sort of start off and he's got a feed of content which is almost instantly coming through. So callouts are Fascinating. They're really changing how this works.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is once you free up the labor involved in putting these stories together, the journalists can get excited about the ideas again.
Wow. This one, looking for recent Italian residential projects or global projects with Italian brands in the interiors.
Mhm.
So you go, that makes sense, doesn't it? If you've got an Italian audience or group of advertisers, you want to make sure that the Italian brands are within those projects, and then that's the perfect match. It's kind of just telling you exactly what they need.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I feel like sometimes there's like this the unspoken truth of what people want in publications. Oh, we really want this, or but without explaining exactly the detail within the project that this really works for our audience. This is exactly what we need. And so people are just left with, I'm going to submit, I don't hear back, and so I don't know what's going on. Whereas this is opening it up a little bit and you go, I can see exactly what's on your radar. And if I can match that, then I can get published.
And it really comes back to appreciating the different audiences as well of different publications and understanding their value to you. So I think one of the another comment that came up was from one of our journalists was being able to find projects with character, lots of color, maybe retro vintage pieces, rather than, I think the quote was, stale homes that are stark white, polished, etc. They don't make for interesting stories. And I think what's really interesting there is there are some publications who love the stark white, polished look, right? But it's not necessarily going to be the more consumer end of that. So you think about the audience and you go, hey, we're wanting to get to people who are looking to design their own home. They're going to be picking up a lot more home magazines. They're going to be going to home based websites. And you want to make sure that as an architect, you're presented there as well, so that essentially you're giving them a gateway drug into architecture and hiring an architect.
Something else we should probably mention is when you are submitting to callouts, you want to make sure that your content actually matches. There's a bit of room where, okay, you don't know if this is a perfect match, but sometimes you know that's not a good match. It's really off the radar. And the only reason this really matters is because it takes the journalists more time to be able to filter out the stuff that isn't really matching them. When you have something that does match, that's the time to jump in and go submit right now and get that content to them as fast as you can. Which reminds me of, maybe we've already told the story about the Pantone call out,
In a
where there
previous
was lots of
episode,
people
yeah.
asking about lots of color. And when one person went out of their way and did the most amazing submission we've seen, where they did all of this research and they had quotes and they just turned up with this package of content, and that's what got published. You can see that if you put effort into compiling the stuff that the journalists need, then you have a much higher chance of getting published.
But I also think with most of these, that's not hard. It's answering a couple of short questions. It's giving, literally just a paragraph answer to some of those questions. And you are instantly at the top of the queue. You're at the front of the queue for being featured.
Well, well, here's a tip that's just come to mind. If you see a journalist asking for a call out that includes product and you've got something that matches, obviously you've got photos and you say, I've got a project. Okay, go and specify the products that were used. What was the material? Then put a quote into that and say why you chose that material. Because you said this last week, which was architects are the best placed to make decisions around the quality of materials. So your voice on this is really, really valuable to journalists. I can imagine if you're a journalist and you had multiple submissions for a call out and somebody went the extra mile to put in that sort of information, they're going to get bumped up, aren't they?
Hands down, it makes a better story. It probably feeds into the advertising team to some extent. Like you got to be sensible about all of this stuff, right? Perfect example is that cladding article that's being written by someone at Ideal Home. And that one is like the perfect example of if you just talk about cladding and you don't mention the actual cladding that is in the project, then you're missing a trick. So make sure you say, hey, this is the cladding, this is where it's from, and this is why we chose it.
Yeah, and this is how you would repurpose content as well. So let's say there's a call out, you think you've got something that matches. Obviously on BowerBird, you can just go submit that kit, takes you about 2 clicks. but it's probably worth having a look at that call out and going, how do I update my information so that it gets more traction with that call out? So make sure you tag the material, make sure you talk about the material. And if you just keep doing that, your your Bower kit should get larger, and the more information you're putting into it, the more valuable it is to more journalists. So this is not about customizing the kit for that one submission. This is about just filling in all the gaps around, I guess, the research around your own project. And these are good prompts to keep doing that.
The other big one, which is sort of harking back to our episode on exclusives, is if a journalist or an editor asks for an exclusive, that means that it hasn't been published anywhere before. Don't submit something that's been published before. There may be some exceptions to that, but really they're asking for an exclusive. So if you are submitting something at a bare minimum, tell them where it's been published before so they can quickly make a decision. We had a writer who said that they went all the way through to pitching a project to a publication only to find out that it had been published somewhere else. That's a huge waste of time. So just be really upfront. If someone is saying, "Hey, we need exclusive content," make sure you say, "Hey, look, it's been published in this one website or whatever." Just be really upfront and transparent so that you're not wasting their time.
Yeah, because you're trying to be a good media partner. You're trying to make the life of the journalist as easy as possible so that they keep coming back to you because you are a credible source. Like that scenario there, again, it's one of those silly mistakes that people makes. Like they just think, oh, I'll submit that, but they don't realize the human on the other side is presenting something to their boss and going, I've got this story, and you go through the pipeline and then it all falls apart. Again, you're just wasting everybody's time with that. So it's just
And I think
common sense,
import
really.
importantly, there are a lot of other opportunities that aren't for exclusives. Like the majority of the call outs we do aren't for exclusive content. They are for, those stories like cladding, step up baths, pools, etc.
Now, the other thing to talk about with these call outs, the way it's working with journalists at the moment is you can create a call out whenever you wish if you are a verified journalist. So to do that, register on BowerBird. You just let us know what publications you cover, and we'll ask you for a LinkedIn profile. We might ask you for some links to articles just to verify you. Once you've got that set up, you can do a call out, and that allows us to send that out to bowerbirders all over the world to ask for that content. But that call out will now feed directly into your submission board. So as they come in, you'll get that feed of content. And so you basically have a way of managing the call out as well. So rather than getting a lot of random emails or content like that, they'll come into your submission board and then they'll be tagged with that call out. So you'll be able to just filter it through and say, okay, I can see everything that's come through for my brick bathrooms call out, and then obviously choose the best ones and go forward.
Well, and the other thing, thinking about the editorial calendar approach, if you know what you're covering a long time in advance, jump onto Bowerbird early in that cycle and put those call outs up there, because our team also meet with every practice that comes onto Bowerbird. So we're able to actually have a conversation around projects that are coming up that maybe haven't even been photographed yet. You should think of our team as an extension of your research team, or an extension of you. And we can go out there and do a lot of that research for you.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Like the editorial calendar. So basically, get your editorial calendar. Let's say, depending on what your timeline is, I guess for websites, you probably need 1 to 2 weeks. What do you recommend?
For the deadline, do you mean?
Yeah,
Yeah,
do you recommend?
definitely 2 weeks. The other thing is we can only send a limited number of these call outs. So if we've got 5 call outs that all come in on the same day and the deadline is tomorrow, we could only possibly send one of those. But even then, it's probably too tight. So yeah, I generally recommend 2 weeks at least for a call out deadline.
So give 2 weeks. And then as you go through your editorial calendar, just keep looping back. And so it should just be a normal thing saying, okay, what's the next topic coming up? Put a call out up on Bowerbird. You'll get the content coming through, and then you just keep doing that for each month or whatever your iteration time is.
And I think you'd be amazed, journalists out there, you'd be amazed how many brand new projects are exactly right for a lot of those call outs. The number of brand new projects that get added to Bowerbird that haven't been published anywhere off the back of a call out. It is really powerful. We're seeing it again and again and again. So, if you need new content, if you need content that hasn't been submitted to other publications before, a call out is the way to do it.
Yeah, I think it overcomes dusty photo syndrome, where
It's
you
dusty
have all the.
photo syndrome, Nick.
It's when architects and designers, they get their project photographed and then they do absolutely nothing with those photos. They pay all this money, they get the photos done, then they just leave them on their hard drive and they move on and they forget about the project. And so it's like they've started to invest in getting like content together and they just don't do anything with it. So the
Well, it quite
call
often
outs.
happens as well with awards programs where you do the photography to enter the awards program, and then that takes months to finally finish. And by the time that's happened, you've forgotten about it.
Which has never made sense to us because people spend so much money on this stuff. And you're almost there. All you need to do is press submit, and suddenly all these journalists would be able to cover your story, but you're missing that last bridge.
But again, that's why call outs are so powerful, because they remind you, oh, there was that project from last year that I haven't done anything with, and we've got the perfect thing for that. So it triggers it to be submitted.
Yeah, so that's why dusty photo syndrome came to mind because
Mm,
callouts have this amazing ability to pull out the content that you would never really expect, and
mm.
then and make it available for all sorts of stories. Because that's the thing, you might be submitting for that one call out, but because you've taken that leap and you've actually submitted it, now you can make that more widely available through BowerBird. So
Mm.
once you build the kit, you may be thinking, oh, I might get a chance of getting covered by this one publication. What you're really doing is making your content available to many, many journalists. You just needed to have the little push to go, okay, I can put that together and press submit.
Exactly.
Very good. Well,
Cool.
anything else on your mind around callouts?
No, just I think for us it was kind of a surprise at how well this worked. I mean, it's kind of obvious in hindsight, but it continues to work really well. The volume of those call outs is going up every month. We're getting more and more of those. All I'd say is if you're already a BowerBird user, make sure that you're paying attention to call outs. You can find them on the Discover Bower Kits page and I think publications page. So you can run through and see what the open ones are. Being proactive, like always, the more proactive you are, the better. But also, this is one of those things where you can be reactive, as in, as soon as they come up, make sure you jump on them straight away.
We attempt to send out emails, but obviously there's only so many emails we can send. And we attempt to match the emails to matching users. But really, if you log into BowerBird once a week and check those call outs, you'll probably see opportunities every single week to be able to submit
100%.
something. Yeah.
Very good. Cool.
Okay. Thank you, Benjamin.
Thank you, Nick.
And if anybody has any questions, please leave comments below wherever you are watching this, whether that's on YouTube or whether you're watching this on LinkedIn or Instagram or some other place. And we will tune in again next week. We'll cover another topic.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll put something on LinkedIn and you can all tell us how angry it makes you, and then we'll do a podcast about it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bowerbirders.
Bye, Bowbirders.
Bye.